Much time had passed since the great Christmas scuffle. Much has happened, and the kingdoms now lay in ruin. The flower at Jacob's grave had grew in, and yet somehow in his tomb he had begun to rustle. Life flowed into him once more, as he looked around in a haze. What he saw, well, let's say, he was left amazed. A chest of armor and food galore. He took what he could, and broke out from the pit. He saw his own grave, and took what was his. Then he saw a flower from the goddess Venus, signed with a kiss. He wavered for a moment, and then had a sit. As he sat there, a polar bear attacked for no reason. Jacob was shocked as he fell back in pain, summoning his trident, as he said, "So this is treason." Why did it attack? This he couldn't explain. His magic had always helped them behave so tame. It was then he realized his magic was low. It was seem his power he needed to reclaim. He realized the gods could make his powers grow. But first, he looked at his kingdom as it lay in ruins. What was he to do? How would he fix this? And what was its undoing? He once had thought that with Cheyenne's rule, the kingdoms would be at bliss. So he sought out Queen Cheyenne within her castle. But the journey there was quite the hassle. A gas fireball flew, and Jacob's attention diverted. He slayed it and then saw Cheyenne's castle deserted. Outside was a grave, much like that of his own. Cheyenne was fallen, and now Jacob was truly alone. He grieved for a moment, shedding many a tear. It seemed he would be consumed by his fear. Then many gases did appear, and Jacob strung his mighty spear. He followed the shots and saw the kingdom afire. He thought, did Austin live? Could this disaster be his own? He ran toward the land and saw the great spires. The land was corrupted, and Austin lay dead. There was no time to mourn, as an army descended. Jacob was weak, but yet still he defended. As he fought on, he saw how far the corruption had spread. The kingdom of fire was taken. It would seem something evil had truly awakened. Jacob was feeling weak, so he started to falter, and he retreated back to the great altar. He put in a plea to the gods above. As he did, he saw a white dove. He hoped it was a sign and followed it through. The journey was long, but he never quit. He then saw a castle in the sky. It looked so majestic as it floated so high. But he started to shake as his body failed him, and then the light seemed to dim. He called to his magic, and it began to rain. The rain flowed through his body, numbing his pain. He then knew his journey must pause. He needed some sleep and went back to his tomb. He felt more at peace there, no matter the cause. And he slept, and he was filled with visions of doom. The time had come. Jacob was rested and felt anew. It was time, so to the altar he flew. A message was left from an old oracle friend. "The gods have been silent to more than just you. I fear the worst. I know not what they've been through. A lot has happened since your fall. Truth be told, not even I know it all. But the problems didn't end. The oracle then warned of a cultist of fire who was manipulating the forces of life and death to their own desire. They brought back the girlfriend of King Austin as a test, but a lifeless corpse without a soul was now in the rest. This has disrupted the mystical arts, and it continues to corrupt many people's hearts. For my vision to be clear, the balance must once again be adhered." With this, Jacob summoned his trident and a storm, and traveled until the villains did appear. The cultists looked on in surprise and fear, and summoned lost souls that became a swarm. The fight was grueling as the souls did attack. Jacob summoned ice armor, but soon it was cracked. Jacob then felt his power surge, and from the sea, Neptune's armors emerged. It flew to Jacob, and with him it merged. Jacob then smiled, and the air itself froze. Not long after, all of the lost souls were purged. Now all that remained were two powerful foes. The cultist summoned a pillar, piercing his chest. As he coughed and from his lungs he did bled, he said, "Austin is the true king." And then he looked at the soulless girl in the cage. "Now rest." The creature looked angry, and it broke through the chains, charging at Jacob as if it was a train. Jacob was shocked. "By the pure power you see," Jacob said, "it is time for you to be free." With that he threw his trident into her chest. The creature fell to the ground, and her body was now at rest. Jacob then merged with the water and traveled back home, where the oracle ran toward him, holding a tome. The oracle's eyes darkened and bled. He delivered his message, and then he had fled. It read, "I have foreseen it all, and the last kingdom shall fall. The gods of light are no more, and darkness mights now will soar. The magic within you remains, and with it hope isn't lost. But you must find a way to restore the balance, no matter the cost. For the child of Zeus on the castle above, appeal to his sense of humanity's love, fight the creatures of corruption, and become the disruption. Jacob then knew what to do. He appeared at its door, but then the wind, how it blew, as it began to roar. It slammed him into a cage, as lightning hit it, knocking him out. When he woke up, he saw a man filled with rage. "You are evil, I have no doubt." Jacob was confused, as he responded with caution. "I am not an agent of evil. I'm an agent of light. I fight for it with all of my might. I am here for a favor, for darkness is rising." The man responded in turn with a devilish smirk. "Do you find me a fool? Do you think this would work? I see that armor you stole from my father's bro. You know the reason they're silent. This I know." Jacob shook his head. "Listen to me. Cheyenne and the gods are my friends. The thought of their deaths fill me with dread. I think with your help, this darkness can be put to its ends." The man's smile faded as he shook his head. "I also fear they may be dead." He then explained he was going to Olympus to see for himself, and he pulled a book from his shelf. "When the times come, read this incantation. First, find us some allies, and then fight those apparitions. I'll be back when I can, and together we will plan." With that, King Isaiah departed, and the alliance was started. When King Isaiah entered Olympus, he saw Zeus. He was hung up on a noose. Isaiah rushed, cutting his father down, but then the darkness began to surround. Zeus was dead and the others too. Now it seems Isaiah's time was through. Isaiah shot his lightning into the surrounding dark, but the power difference was clearly quite stark. Isaiah screamed, "Show yourself, you freak!" A sinister voice responded, "Your future is rather bleak. I killed your parents. In comparison, you are weak." Isaiah's eyes then filled with rage, and then it was war. He was ready to rage. His arms crackled with power, and then with lightning he did shower. The darkness was seemingly put out. He was sure he could win. He had no doubt. Then his father's body shook and twisted, and now it seemed with the shadows he did enlisted. The fallen Zeus turned on his son, who dodged as he started to run. But Zeus clapped, and Isaiah fell. But quickly he recited a spell. The spell was one of great might, and Isaiah's eyes turned a bright right. From his hand a beam of light started to grow, wrapping around his new foe. He then did a cleansing ritual, freeing his dad. Watching his father become lifeless again was really quite sad. Then from the shadows, Ares appeared. Suddenly Isaiah was filled with great fear. Isaiah then started to speak as he was grabbed by the throat, as if he was weak. He couldn't form a spell. He struggled and wanted to yell. The mighty foe smiled as Isaiah's eyes started to dim. It appeared his future was quite grim. Isaiah realized his own power he had to rely as he looked up toward the sky. And then lightning shot into his foe, but it appeared to be a rather weak blow. Ares smiled as he started to laugh. Isaiah then reached out and summoned Zeus's staff. He used it to push himself free. He spun as he counted. 1, 2, 3. That's when Ares charged and Isaiah hit, knocking him back, and with blood he did spit. Isaiah saw this and pressed the attack. Ares seemingly was falling aback. Then Isaiah used his staff for a mighty swing, but Ares caught it and broke it as if it was a mere thing. Isaiah was stunned by this impossible act. Ares' power was unparalleled, and that was a fact. Isaiah pulled a book containing a spell. He began to read for it, but then he did fell. He awoke in a haze, but it appears it had been some days. He was in a tower in chains, and spikes were stuck into him, causing great pain. He tried to escape, but the spikes only grew. It was then that he finally knew. He was alive as mere bait, and that was his fate. Jacob's mission continued as he sought new friends for the alliance. He knew they'd need more strength for their defiance. His people were gone and so were his knights. This left him with only his and Isaiah's might. So he gathered his strength and built an army of new. Snow warriors by the dozen is what he did grew. He then restarted the agriculture. Soon enemies arrived, as if they were vultured. He talked to them and saw they weren't all bad. In fact, most of their stories were quite sad. He allowed them to join the kingdom for sanctuary, though he did so while being quite wary. He had them make amends with all those they wronged, and truth be told, they found where they belonged. Now he had an army of men. He left them behind so they could defend. On his journey he went to look for more allies. One came to mind, though he thought it was unwise. He went to the legion of Chilo's domains. He saw it still standing, but no army remains. Chilo appeared and looked on in surprise, saying, "I don't believe my eyes. Jacob alive? And at my great land? Is it time I take my great stand?" Jacob smiled and said, "Do not dread. I am looking for Sir Green, or maybe the Queen. Have you seen them? What do you know?" Chilo responded, No, I live here all alone. My army deserted, but I know nothing of that, he asserted. Jacob shook his head as he ready to go. Callow said, Wait, is that all? I have questions. I saw your kingdom fall. How are you back? Should I be ready for an attack? Jacob said yes, but not from me. I foresaw the end of us all, even thee. Help could be useful. Is there a deal to be made? Callow replied, I'll join so long as I get paid. 2 horses I need. With that, my help you've guaranteed. The deal was struck and the horses brought, and then they left without a second thought. They arrived at the portal to hell. That's when Jacob used his great spell. When the castle was in sight, Jacob whispered, Are you ready to fight? Callow nodded, then shook with fear when the 3 corruptors appeared. It turns out his fear was well founded, as with attacks they were surrounded. Jacob's armor could handle the blows, but Kylo's crumbled against the foes. Jacob saw this and told Callow to run. It was too late, and with one final hit, Callow was done. Jacob's eyes turned right as he decided he wouldn't lose someone in this fight. Ice spikes sprung from the ground into the beast. However, it didn't seem to bother them in the least. So Jacob dodged their many blows, and his trident then started to glow. He shot a beam of light into the beast. It fell, and the others began to feast. They devoured their friend and grew stronger. But Jacob had no fear. He could go on much longer. He froze one in place. He then rushed the other, narrowing the space. The creature then swung its mighty fist. Jacob slid, making it miss. He then swung his trident into its chest. It fell to the ground as if a mere pest. Then he shattered the ice containing the other, and shortly thereafter, it joined its 2 brothers. He turned to Callow, covered in blood. Jacob said, Hang in there, bud. Jacob then used his magic to heal. Light was all the 2 could feel. Callow's wounds were healed, and then he awakened. Truth be told, he was beyond shaken. He looked at Jacob in confusion. Seemingly unaware, he was angered by the intrusion. I didn't ask for your help, you stupid little whelp, he responded. Callow then got up and started to flee. Looking back, he muttered, Next time, it'll cost much more to ally with me, as this time it was practically for free. Jacob once again visited Callow. He was at the back, working in his silo. Jacob said, Hello, Callow. I request your aid. Callow responded, What'll I get paid? Jacob said, Depends on what you need. Callow laughed, Hee hee hee. Well, I already have some mighty steed, so I want an army, armor, and tools, you see. Jacob pondered, If I give you that, do you promise not to be cruel? Callow shook his head no. So Jacob frowned as he started to go. Jacob turned back, Help me, you know it's what's right. Leave the silo. I know there's still good in you, Sir Callow. Callow laughed, Hee hee hee. That is no longer me. I respond only to Mr. V. V for vengeance, V for vendetta. I'll avenge more than just my Marietta. Jacob then left, heading to the north, reaching the sea, and then his trident he called forth. He traveled the waves at speeds almost the speed of sound. On his search, he saved someone from the drowned. The 2 talked a bit, and then they became allies. The man came clean, vowing to tell no lies. He gave insight into the plans of V. Jacob then sent him to the Ice Kingdom through the Great Sea. As Jacob traveled, he remembered how far the Bear Kingdom once spanned, passing by all of his old land. Then he remembered an old plan, one shared by both him and Queen Cheyenne. There are villages loyal to the Bear King, not recognizing Jacob as the real thing. They trusted not the magic that kept him alive, not understanding how he could possibly survive. He began checking them one by one. He made some see he was real, and almost all of them knew alliances he had won. Though, to Cheyenne, he was getting closer, this he could feel. He saw a land he hadn't visited since the war. He stopped a meteor as it did soar. When he went inside, he was greeted by a man. Turns out he was mayor, and let's say he wasn't a fan. Jacob talked to him, saying he sought his friends. The mayor replied, They were here. They'd be put to their ends. Jacob looked confused, seeing through the lie, so he replied, Why would they need to die? I think that was a poor excuse, but why? Oh well, I don't mean to pry, but I think you know my friend's shy. The man looked around in a panic. His behavior started to seem rather manic. He pulled out his sword and charged the king. Jacob grabbed it, and then with it he did fling. Jacob replied, I will not harm you, and I have no ill will. Calm down and stop this fight, you don't have the skill. The man's mania seemed to swell, and his aggression level fell. The man replied, I am sorry. I believe you are who you are. But here's the thing. Many here do too, but they hate magic. I know it's somewhat tragic, but it's true. With the hate they do spew. I lied to you because my wife and daughter are gods. I wish you hadn't seen through my great facade. Her magic is gone. Green explained it before he left with John. Jacob then realized the truth. Cheyenne was Ethan's bride, and his eyes grew wide as he said, I wish I was there to see her big day. But one thing is clear, it is here with you and your child she must stay. Tell her not of my rebirth, or the corruption spreading throughout the earth. I'll handle this with Isaiah and my other ally. We must ensure at least one old god does not die. Ethan replied, I'll do as you say, but come back here if you ever need somewhere to stay. Jacob smiled and said, only in a code red. I don't want to be the reason you are all dead. Where did this John and Sir Green go? Ethan replied that he did not know. With no leads, Jacob decided to leave and go home, as he might never know where Sir Green now did roam. But with more of his old kingdom allied once more, the Ice Kingdom's power had grown as he prepared to face the new war. King Jacob sensed a great change in the air. He made an announcement and told his army to be aware. A tower of darkness has returned once more. He hadn't felt this kind of darkness since the Great War. Jacob then arrived at the tower, and with arrows it did shower. He reacted fast and created a shield. King Jacob then made it clear the godly power he now wield. He flew in the air as fast as the light, and with one hit he showed his true might. The tower collapsed, and a soulless being crept out, and then it began to shout, How dare you destroy the temple of Mars? With this land now we shall make many scars. The creature then raised its arm, and the dead did rise. Then from the ground lost souls also started to arise and swarm like flies. Jacob was alone and surrounded by foe. Many ice spears were made, and he began to throw. The spear stopped the zombie, severing the head, but the souls still attacked, filling Jacob with great dread. So he summoned his powers and shot a great light, releasing the souls and ending that fight. But he knew one enemy still remained, the soulless one, whose powers were drained. The soulless being looked on as he struggled to walk. Jacob stopped him and asked if he would talk. Who summoned the tower, and why here? Is this something I should know? Is this something to fear? The soulless being said, rather faint, The land is something we need to taint. I was a knight once, before Kylo corrupted. I was a knight once, before my soul was disrupted. Jacob then looked on as the being disappeared. Then with his magic, the tower rubble Jacob cleared. Jacob then summoned his trident and traveled the sea. He arrived back at the kingdom as he saw V now flee. Jacob yelled, screaming, Stop! As Jacob then began to chase. When he stepped on a line, and arose a great pop. TNT exploded, and with that Jacob fell back. He was caught off guard by the betrayal of such an attack. Jacob then looked around and saw a terrible sight. Around the museum there were countless dead knights. It appeared V had done as he always did. TNT is something he must have hid, using the guise of alliance for entry, allowing him to get past all of the sentry. Jacob looked at the museum. The relics were gone. Jacob then wondered if he knew he was just Ares' pawn. Luckily, Jacob foresaw the break-in, and the decoys were all that V had taken. So when V's crest was done, he began an evil spell. The fakes lacked any real power, and so his soul he did sell. Claws cut into his being and tore it apart. It corrupted and tore right into his heart. The spell then began to change, and V lived through it, though rather strange. His body corrupted, and his soul mostly in hell. He was corrupted by his own spell. He did gain some power, and now with souls he sought to devour.